when I first heard the news about, you getting let go, I was shocked. I thought it was a really cruel joke at first.
You got like a needs improvement or something, whatever we call it. I remember it didn't end well.
I don't remember you getting fired. I just remember one day you weren't there. It was very hush-hush.
There were some definite things we wanted you to work on and do in a timely fashion. By not doing it, it escalated.
He was like, well, Julio's great in some ways, but he's got some performance issues in other ways. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I literally don't know what you're talking about.
I always thought about you as being somebody who was tenacious, somebody who was creative, somebody who was entrepreneurial, somebody who was a great communicator, somebody who was passionate. But it wasn't lost on me that you were also a person that was misunderstood.
Have you ever been fired? Well, I have. And not just once, but 4 times in a row. I know what you're thinking. It must have been because I was bad at my job or I did something terrible. But that's not it. In fact, I had some of the best roles at the most sought-after tech companies. Apple, Google, Tumblr, Airbnb, and Lyft. Launching products you may know and use today, like the iPad, Google Drive, Airbnb Plus, even self-driving cars. I had the titles and the paychecks, the connections and the coveted projects, but I still kept getting fired. And for a long time, I was too ashamed to admit it, and certainly too afraid to be honest, especially with myself, because who likes talking about failure? But I'm ready now, because my mess is the message. I'm Julio Alvarez, tech leader turned executive coach, and this is Braving Big Tech, a 5-part series about the highs, lows, and pivotal moments of my 15-year career, and what led me to the mission I am on now, empowering you with the courage to lead from your heart. My hope is that you see some of yourself in this story and use it so that together we can slow down, redefine our failures, and bring humanity back into leadership. This is part 1, Apple, Armoring Up. So how do you get fired not once, but 4 times from some of the best jobs out there? Well, as one of my mentors put it, I was well-intentioned, but poorly implemented. I was running from past pain, disconnected from my feelings, and stuck in a cycle of shame. Each firing felt like another confirmation of the voice in my head that said, I'm just not good enough. So, I did what many of us do. I built armor around my heart to shield myself from vulnerability. That armor took the form of behaviors and habits that I thought would protect me, but only made things worse. As Brené Brown says, everyone wants to be brave, very few of us want to feel vulnerable. What I wasn't seeing was that I was being nudged in another direction, not just away from my current roles in tech, but towards my own healing. So, to understand where this armor came from, how it propelled me into a rocket ship tech career, and the role it played as I climbed the corporate ladder, we've got to go back to the beginning. I'm born and raised in New York, Long Island, or Strong Island, as we like to say. My parents met in high school, and they were only teenagers when my sister and I came along. I was an unplanned baby, born cross-eyed and needing surgery, an early hurdle for me and for them, young parents just trying to make ends meet. They both had tough upbringings. My mom was born to Italian Americans living on Long Island, and they moved around a lot. Her mother was abusive, and her father died when she was just 18. That's when she joined the Air Force, seeking a sense of stability. But by 19, she was already raising her first child. And she was a working mom, cleaning houses for rich people when we were young. Later, she became a nurse and then a teacher. She was a fighter, determined to give us the life she never had. But beneath that resilience, it was a temper that could turn on a dime. Okay, 1 minute she was loving and supportive. The next she was chasing my ass down, lashing out, and then crying later as she apologized and tried to justify her behavior. Then there was my dad, who was born in Ecuador and immigrated to America with his family as a kid, chasing the American dream. He landed a union job maintaining signals on the Long Island Railroad, a stable gig with good pay, benefits, and security. He carried himself with a tough guy machismo energy, which sent me a very clear message growing up, that men like us don't do vulnerability. I grew into a light-skinned, outgoing gay kid, okay, who wasn't afraid to speak up or stand out. With my baby blue velour jumpsuits, my gold chain, and my white Ugg boots, I was a far cry from what my dad had in mind for a son. He always had something to mock me for. "Ta gordo, you look fat. Why you dress like that? Stop talking so much." His judgmental and condescending words, they were cushioned in a chuckle to make it all seem in good fun, but it wasn't. My parents were armored up from their own unresolved trauma, and they didn't know how to handle their pain, so they offloaded it by going after each other. Home often felt like a battlefield. 1 minute it was calm, and the next they were at war, sometimes with us in the crossfire. My sister and I, we lived in a state of hypervigilance, trying to predict and navigate the emotional storms before we became the target of their harsh words or even the belt. They had a long and messy divorce that began when I was about 13, filled with violent arguments and late-night visits from the cops. Growing up in this unstable environment, I was learning to armor up too. I was developing a thick skin, a strong inner critic, and a whole lot of resentment. How many of us know what that's like, growing up with parents who were doing their best, but whose best still leaves wounds? Here's my mom.
After I had you and Felicia, I didn't like the way he was parenting. Because, you know, right, a mom, her babies, she protects her cubs. And if someone's not treating them right, whether who you are or not, doesn't really matter. His interaction with you was very distant. You know, like you were my fucking kid. We were at that intensity at that point. So it was strange because he didn't behave like that with Felicia. And so it was really hard for me to understand. But at the same time, I really didn't focus on it or like shit stir because I had a whole lot going on. You know, and then once the verbal attacks, you know, come, those words don't ever go away. And then you harbor hate.
Resentment and hate, yeah.
You know, he would make comments in front of his railroad buddies. She's not smart enough to get a degree, a nursing degree. But with all that being said, the snarky remarks just was clearly a reflection of who he saw when he looked in the mirror. Not me. He used to say, one day, I'm going to sign the papers or something. He said it like 3 or 4 times. And I think by then I was already there. And at the 4th time, I said, you know what? I'm going to sign the fucking papers. You sign the fucking papers. He became aggressive. I had to get a friend of mine to put in a steel door in between us because he kicked the fucking door down. Oh my God, it was nuts.
So how did I cope with all that crazy? When things exploded, I'd run away to my room, blast my music with my disco lights on, and play with my model cars for hours. I'd imagine a version of myself far from the chaos. You know, a big house, a garage full of BMWs and Range Rovers, an important job, and a life where I was in total control. That vision was my escape. And it was also my fuel to keep going. This idea that one day I'm gonna have something better. I learned early on that if I wanted the validation and independence and stability that I yearned for, I'd have to create it for myself. As I got older, I poured my energy into school, volunteering, and leadership. Building homes with Habitat for Humanity, working at soup kitchens and community gardens, organizing visits to veterans' homes, and even running a youth leadership camp for Rotary International. School really became my sanctuary. I was the kid who stayed from sunrise to sunset, organizing meetings, leading projects, building a reputation as someone who could get things done. And my teachers, they saw me in ways that my parents couldn't. They encouraged me, validated me, and gave me a glimpse of who I could become. So what started as a way to escape the turbulence at home became something so much more. I actually discovered my talents for service, for organizing and mobilizing people. And it turns out my mom recognized these qualities in me even earlier.
Well, I just think from very early on, you were always able to lead a pack, right? And I mean young, 4 years old. We'd have birthday parties with like 20, 40 kids. And how you rallied them, you were the rule maker, like everybody had to follow rules. And people listened, you were able to lead just very early on. You just didn't have time for no nonsense. If you saw nonsense, then, you didn't want that in your circle. You always served the people, too. You always wanted me to do the soup kitchen things, cook the this, the that. Whatever you wanted to do, I just encouraged it. You were fundraising.
Yeah.
I mean, I need a $25 bakeware. What are we doing? Oh, so we're having a group of kids come in and we're doing a bake-off. Okay.
Yeah. Why do you think I did that? What
you were looking for connection because you didn't get it from your father. Those places had a lot of male and, entrepreneurs, a lot of male role models, positive role models. I think.
Maybe that's what it was. I was like, I want to be around male adult,
And you wanted people with brains.
Yeah.
You wanted to be you wanted to feed off their intelligence.
Yeah.
But you put a lot of pressure on yourself. You pressurized everything. A high critic. There was a lot going on in our house. And also, too, you had a lot going on in your own, mind and body and spirit. You were figuring who you were out.
I dealt with chaos at home, but also at school. You see, I was a geeky, mixed-race kid with glasses, braces, and a mushroom-style haircut. So I got bullied every day for how I looked and for sticking up for my friends who also didn't fit in. And in high school, as I started to become known for my leadership activities, those same bullies gave me so much attitude. Like, who does this kid think he is? After my parents divorced, I bounced back and forth between living with my mom and living with my dad. And at one point in high school, while I was living with my dad, we got into a fight about who was going to pay for college. And that was really the argument that broke the camel's back, because all that pent-up anger I had towards him finally came pouring out. That fight, it got physical, and it ended with cops, court appearances, and me scrambling to find somewhere else to live. I had to get out of this toxic environment. My mom, she was in a small apartment and didn't have the space. So I ended up moving in with a couple that I knew from the Rotary Club, local veterinarians Dr. Dave and Dr. D. Henson. They took me in without hesitation, and their kindness, it gave me the stability I needed to finish high school and start college. But the fallout of that fight with my dad was severe. We stopped talking for over a decade. When I look back on that younger version of me, the image that comes to mind is that I was running from my family and towards the validation and security that I rarely felt as a kid. I chased anything that might tell me, hey, I see you and you're enough. I thought that with enough hard work, success, and impact, that I could outrun any problem. So I tried to get into the best schools and land the most prestigious jobs. College just wasn't a priority for my parents. After high school, my dad went straight to work and my mom went into the Air Force. Plus, it was expensive, and neither of them were in a position to help me pay for it. My dad always touted, "You don't need school, you need to make money. Go out and get a real fucking job." But I was determined to go. I worked summer jobs in high school and I applied to as many scholarships as I could get. And it worked. I got into NYU thanks to a state-funded program for kids like me, low-income minorities with poor test scores but big potential. They provided tutoring, support services, and tuition assistance. And honestly, without them, going to NYU would have been impossible. I wanted to make the most of my college experience, and I saw a lot of opportunities to take on more leadership roles. I was elected to the Student Senate. There were 22 of us representing 40,000 students, and I was working with the president and trustees on major projects, including the development of NYU's Abu Dhabi campus and the creation of NYU Green, our first sustainability task force. I also stayed connected with my scholarship program, working in their alumni relations department to raise money while also expanding my network. When I graduated in 2009, in the middle of the financial crisis, I was eager to start my career and establish my credibility. But back on Long Island, my family needed me. My sister was stuck in a bad situation with an abusive partner, and I immediately went into savior mode. A pattern I had developed growing up, trying to protect my mom when my dad was abusive. But as I stepped in to help with bills, legal issues, and emotional support, I felt the resentment building. I was angry that so much of my time, energy, and money had gone into fixing things that I didn't break. Angry that my mom was dating some guy who was taking advantage of her because he couldn't get his own life together. When I brought it up, she got defensive, with a sharp and familiar expression that signaled, "Do not make me come over there and smack you."
Now, we had some tough times.
Yes.
We had some very tough times, but it's because you're a lot like me. We're both stubborn. We're both forceful.
Mm-hmm.
We're both, we speak our mind.
Yeah, that's true.
It's kind of like throwing shit in a fan. You know it's coming right back at you. And that's a fact. And I knew that, because you were the challenger. You would challenge.
Because I'm like, do you not see what's going on here?
Right.
Like, I was frustrated that you're not willing to face the obvious challenge. But then also, I think I need to just find a way to regulate and deal with this, because this is her life and her
Right.
situation, not mine.
Right.
So I gotta deal with it.
Right. No, I get it. But you did deal with it, and you did deal with it.
Yes.
Like, you brought his drinking to the attention, and then he stopped his drinking.
Yeah, I did confront him on that, didn't
Yes, you did.
What do you remember that? I don't really remember that.
Oh, I do. So
Really?
So we were out on the porch, and you were like, "My mother's out there working so hard, and you're over here sitting here getting hammered. Like, what the hell's that?" You would just be real snarky. Like, you wouldn't even polish it up. You were very, very adamant about protection. Like, you always go into protection mode.
Yes.
You think your mother can't handle shit, but guess what? She can. She just does it differently. But you know what I mean.
Totally.
And I understand that, and I appreciate that. Believe me, I do. But you shouldn't have to work. You shouldn't have to go into protection mode. No child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there I was, back on Long Island with my family, feeling ashamed and completely alone. What kind of kid has to play caretaker at this age? I had no mentorship, no one to confide in about the weight I was carrying. But I was determined to get back to the city ASAP, so I started applying for jobs, and my criteria was good for my wallet, good for my resume. I studied economics and sustainable development at NYU, which was not exactly a pipeline into tech, but something about the tech world fascinated me. It was innovative, creative, and came with a crazy amount of resources and possibility. So, of course, I applied to Google, which was the Harvard of the corporate world. But I got rejected twice. I did hear back from Apple, and I was accepted into a new program for recent college grads called the Apple Store Leadership Program. It was based inside retail stores, but connected to corporate, which meant for us better titles and higher salaries. It wasn't exactly a corporate job, but it was the closest I could get. Plus, it was Apple. I was excited about the name recognition, the financial stability, and maybe most importantly, the sense that people would see me as more accomplished than I felt on the inside. I could feel like I've made it. I moved back to New York City and got an apartment on West 17th Street with Eric Scheffler, a friend of a friend who was an engineer at Google. It was a tiny second floor walk up, but that neighborhood was poppin'. Every night felt like an adventure, going out to parties, dinners, bars. It felt like living at the center of the universe. And Eric was a great roommate, but I couldn't help feeling insecure around him. He was a brilliant engineer at Google, while I was sort of working at Apple. I carried this retail shame that set off that voice in my head again. I'm just not good enough.
We kind of had two separate social lives, as I recall. Like, you were often off hanging out with people that I never really met. And so you're like, oh, I'm off. I've got to go like do this thing or whatever. And then I would go off to like, my social life was typically very Google centric. I'm able to remember one time we went out to brunch together or something like that. I think it was just like, we probably both had like a night the night before and woke up and we're like, hey, let's just go to brunch. And I was like, why do we not do this more? I feel like we connect well and like we should like hang out more, but we are like always kind of off doing our own things.
It's interesting to hear you say that your experience was that we were doing separate social stuff. And I think the truth of it is that was by design because I was intimidated. I felt like you were so put together and so smart and you were the smart engineer at Google. And I was like, oh my God, he's going to find out that like I'm dumb and I'm not good enough. So I think as I reflect and hear your story, part of the reason why I created my distance is because I was struggling with my own worthiness. Like I didn't think that I was good enough to be a friend.
Yeah. There was no sense from my part that like you're an outsider, which is like how you're describing it. The connection through Carl as like, you know, Carl's a really smart person. I like just figure like, hey, you're a really smart person. You're working at Apple. So it's really interesting to hear that perspective because that wasn't my attitude towards you at all. And here I was thinking like, this guy's really cool and I want to hang out with him, but he's got this like busy social life. Like I can't tap into that. I want to tap into that. So it's sort of interesting that on both sides of us, we were like, we would like to spend more time together, but we can't for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
We had different reasons, but yeah, it's interesting.
Wow.
The Apple program staffed us at one of their retail stores where we'd rotate through the different departments: sales, marketing, operations, product, and customer support, gathering a 360-degree view of the business. It was a crash course in how a product is ideated in California and then sent out into the world through the retail experience. Part of our role was to understand the customer journey, identify pain points, and offer recommendations for improvement. It was a rare opportunity to see the intersection of creativity and precision that defines the Apple brand from the inside. It shaped the way I think about leadership, and it prepared me for the roles I would take on later in my career. To this day, I still leverage processes and frameworks I learned at Apple. Here's Teresa Rivera. She was the business manager at the Apple Store Soho, where I was staffed.
I was really genuinely in awe of the three of you because I just thought it was so special that you were chosen, you know, that you worked really hard to become part of this program. And all three of you really embraced it. And you all had different personalities, right? Which was really great. But it meshed.
Yes.
And so It was such a highlight for me when you guys were there, and just being able to work together and just seeing a different perspective. Like, I learned from you, I learned from you, and I learned different perspective. I saw how you handled things. I saw how you learned. Like in business, nobody was teaching me at Apple how to do business. I had to go in there knowing what I was going to do and then make it happen, right? So there was no one saying, oh, do this, do this, do this. So it was great to see from a different perspective with you that you came in there knowing stuff that I didn't know, because I didn't go to the colleges you guys went to. You guys went to some really cool colleges. And you had the book knowledge that I never had, that I never really got. So I really enjoyed it.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah. I just remember you being super engaged and a sponge. And it was a while ago, right? So this was kind of really at the start of your career. For me, it was a highlight to just see just how much you wanted to learn. I found you very approachable and curious and caring, empathetic, and I think maybe you didn't even realize that at that point, that was a gift that you had, but I recognized it. Right. Which is why I think I was so attracted to working with you and just really enthusiastic about putting time in with you.
Yeah. And I think I really learned a lot at Apple. One of the things being the importance of empathy and seeing the customer, truly seeing them, validating them, acknowledge, align, and assure. All of this stuff is coaching. It's I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge that you're having a problem, and I'm committed to helping you. Let's break it down. And it was like, wow, this is so beautiful. It feels very human. And I credit a lot of my success to still using pieces of that in my work today.
So do you remember, and look at me, I'm going to interview you now. Do you remember any interactions that you had at Apple where you think you exercised that with a customer?
Oh, I had, it was like a game. I just remember coming in through the side door, putting my badge on, and it was just all right, who am I going to serve powerfully now? Let me go grab somebody. And I would just go on the prowl to find people and just use it as a way to experiment. I'm going to try this. Let me ask this question. Let me say this. Let me comment on this. And it felt playful and fun. And Apple really gave me the permission to do that. And it gave me frameworks. I could use acknowledge, align, assure, permission, position, permission, probe.
Right.
All these things that I could play with.
Apple is Apple for a reason. They definitely train and want the people that join Apple to have that sort of sentiment about wanting to create the best experience. I think you were definitely someone that got that right away. It was inherent in your personality.
That was my biggest takeaway from Apple. Learning to have empathy for the customer. To always pay attention to your personal energy and how you're making people feel. Calm and hopeful when they arrive. Reassured and satisfied when they leave. And to do the right thing for them, even when no one's looking. Most companies miss the mark here. They focus so much on short-term gains and the bottom line that they lose sight of the people they're serving. I remember the launch of the very first iPad in early 2010.
And we'd like to show it to you today for the first time. And we call it the iPad.
The world was buzzing with skepticism. Critics were calling it nothing more than a large iPhone, expecting it to flop, and maybe even take Apple down with it. In preparation for the launch, Apple employees were invited to hear Steve Jobs speak. And in his usual fashion, he was calm but electric, even with the pessimism surrounding the launch. He didn't sound rehearsed or corporate, it was real. And he didn't just talk about the iPad. He talked about Apple's mission to reshape the way people lived and connected. You see, it wasn't just about selling products, it was also about vision. You could feel his passion in every word, an illustration of leading with heart. Then Steve said something that really struck me. He said, being uncomfortable is your body's way of telling you you're learning something. I pulled out my phone, opened up the Notes app, and typed, "Okay, Julio, make yourself uncomfortable every day. That's how you're gonna learn." It felt like a call to action, one that I was eager to embrace. I wanted to grow, to push myself professionally, but emotionally, I didn't realize how much my armor was keeping me in my comfort zone. Eventually, my experience at Apple became unfulfilling because I wanted to contribute on a higher level. We spent more time selling phones and configuring store layouts than on solving more complicated business problems. I knew deep down I was capable of more, but whenever I tried to bring more to the table, it wasn't always well received. One example, I wanted Apple to march in the New York City Pride Parade, just like Google did. I escalated the idea several times, but it went nowhere because Apple had a strict policy against outside sponsorships or affiliations at the time. That left me feeling deflated, like, ugh, they don't get it. They don't see the importance of this. These aren't my people. I wasn't feeling heard by my manager either. We'll call her Jen. You see, part of the intention of the leadership program was to help improve the business. But I didn't feel like Jen took the program or my recommendations seriously. She came from a high-end fashion brand with a work culture that valued the hierarchy of employees, so she didn't like being challenged. I knew other people agreed with some of my concerns. They just weren't willing to speak up. But I was. I tried being diplomatic at first, but as my frustrations grew, so did my intensity. I started speaking my mind in ways that weren't always constructive or palatable. I got louder, more forceful to prove my point, just like my parents did when they argued. My body language and my tone of voice made clear, hello, I do not have time for this nonsense. That energy showed up in meetings, in email replies, and especially in how I confronted Jen. I realize now how unproductive that approach was, but I didn't know how else to handle it at the time. It was so ingrained in me. It was automatic. Eventually, Jen had enough of my attitude and I was let go.
I don't remember you getting fired. That's the thing. I just remember one day you weren't there. It was very hush-hush. I didn't know what happened. And yeah, it just wasn't anything that anybody wanted to talk to me about. And I think they probably didn't because they knew that you and I had a really good relationship and they just didn't want me to know. So unfortunately, I did not know, or else I would have put a stop to it.
I walked in and had an 8.5 by 11 printed out of a Facebook post of mine. And it was something to the effect of, you called out sick, but you posted on Facebook, so clearly you're not sick. And then it went down this rabbit hole, and it was just like, it almost felt like, wow, this is bizarre. And then I had some friends be like, you should call an attorney. This doesn't sound good. But at that point, I was so in shock. I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I'm not going to get an attorney involved in this. Like, I'm just going to, put my tail between my legs and walk away and try and figure out the next thing. And that's kind of what I did.
I never heard that story, not once. And I don't think that it should have happened that way, because especially Apple, they have a mechanism of reporting and performance reviews and write-ups and, doing all these things. And I never once heard that was something that you were going through.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere.
They were searching for something, right? Think about that, Julio. One post on a Facebook page because you're out sick, how dare you? That's none of your business, right? It's none of their business. Yeah. It's none of their business. It was different if you were what, they considered stealing time, where you're doing social media while you're on the clock, right? That's a different story. You had sick time, right? You earn the sick time. What you choose to do on your sick time, if you're sick and in bed and wanting to get on social media, whatever, that's on you. So
I think also too, there got to a point where I became an agitator with
I gave her good graces, gave her goodwill, was really nice the first time, the second time, and the third time. And then I started to see this catty stuff. I started, say one thing, do another. I started to sense some like inauthentic energy. And at the time I was like, ooh, I'm going to root that out. I'm going to make sure that person knows.
Yeah.
And
That's
she
the New
definitely
Yorker.
did. Yeah, that's a New Yorker in me. I'm like, honey, let me sit you down and I just want to bring to your attention. I can tell there's a little bit of inauthenticity here. So I'd like to know what's really going on. And it was like, who the fuck are you?
It really only happened with a couple of people, right?
Mm.
The rest of like my team and the rest of the people that had one-on-one interactions with you all walked away feeling better than they did before they met you. Sometimes I think people are intimidated by people that are looking to better themselves. They come across somebody who's looking to learn, who's looking to do more, who has an interest, who's enthusiastic, who's ambitious. And it can be off-putting to some people. They don't know how to handle it. People were threatened by your intellect, right? They were threatened by your questions. They were threatened by you wanting to know more because that could somehow represent danger to them.
That's so true. And actually, even you just saying threatened by the questions, that has been a theme for me, that people would push back on questioning. And now I recognize as a coach, a good question is extraordinary. Like it is actually a key to unlocking and gaining clarity. And people who push back behind the questions, there's something going on there. I don't want to dig into it. I don't want to be held accountable or seek the truth.
I do feel like people are they're afraid. They're afraid of being seen because if they're seen, then they're vulnerable. And if they're vulnerable, they're showing weakness. What's the opposite of showing weakness? It's strength. So for them, strength means everything that you're afraid of, you have to like attack or you have to push away or you have to like nip it in the bud.
Instead of taking the time to work through our deeper issues, like teamwork, communication, giving and receiving feedback, it was probably easier for Jen to use that Facebook post as a tangible reason to just fire me. And it would be tempting to hold a grudge about that, but looking back, I can take responsibility for my part too. You see, what was really going on was that she saw that Facebook post as evidence that I was disengaged, that I was out and about on my sick day. And you know what? She wasn't wrong. I was disengaged, and I felt justified because I was angry with her. I mean, come on, how many of us can relate to feeling unheard, frustrated and disillusioned by our work, doing minimum viable just to get by because anything more doesn't feel worth it? But there were other ways to handle the situation. I could have tried to stay ambitious in my role, but with more kindness and less entitlement. I could have accepted that you may not love every aspect of the job, and you know what? That is okay, especially when you're early in your career. But I let my insecurity and frustration get the better of me. Instead of seeing this job as a stepping stone, an opportunity to learn and grow, I acted like it was below me. And instead of viewing my manager conflict as an isolated incident, I let it sour my entire experience of the job. If you've ever been fired, laid off, parted ways, regardless of the specific circumstance, you know what an emotional roller coaster it can be. After I handed over my badge and laptop and was escorted out the side door, part of me thought, well, good, I don't want this retail job anyway. But I also felt deeply humiliated and ashamed. Like, here you are, graduating NYU with a scholarship, landing a job at Apple, and you blow it all up by getting fired? What a fucking idiot. But you know, after everything I had been through with my family, bottling up pain and moving on was my specialty. So I kept it a total secret. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my family, my friends, or even my roommate Eric that I'd been fired.
To me, it just looked like that wasn't working out for me. I'm moving on to something else that's going to be more right for me.
Yeah.
And you also sort of created this like this persona that your goal was to sort of find, like, kind of work your way up to the thing that you really wanted. You know, Apple was never your ultimate goal. Like in any of our conversations, it always kind of felt like this is like a means to an end of where I want to get to.
Yeah.
And so when that went away, it was like, I've drained that of what it's going to provide me. And now I'm moving on to the next big thing, and I'm going to get something from that.
The narrative I used to tell myself was like I was a failure. But what I'm learning is it's like there were failures, but also discernment. And I think part of the reason why I got fired is because I was pushing back against people and I was holding the line on stuff that I thought was right. And if it didn't work out, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm flying the plane while building it. And if it crashes, it crashes. I'll pick up and I'll go to the next thing.
That's how I saw you. Like, I saw you as a person who would like quickly lose interest in something and move on to the next thing. And I don't see that as a bad thing or that you were struggling. It just seemed like that was your personality. Like, this is the way that you live life.
In the next episode, I'll take you back to the glory days of Google. That's right, baby. I finally got my dream job.
In this memory I have of you at the time, it was like, you never know when the elevator door opens, like who's going to be in there with Julio. You know? Seriously, that's what I remember. And one time, Leah DeLaria walked out and you introduced us and, you know.
Braving Big Tech was written and hosted by me, Julio Alvarez. It was produced and edited by Rikki Gunton, and our theme song is Breaking Out by Nick Deutsch, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. A special thank you to the 15 leaders brave enough to get on the mic with me for this series. And hey, let's stay connected. You can find me at letsgowithjulio.com. And if listening to this brings up something for you, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot me a note at hello@letsgowithjulio.com.